November 8th, 2019 meeting. Christine, would you please read the Open Public Meetings Act statement?
I've noticed that this meeting of the Council Commission was given in compliance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act, sent providing notice to all municipal and county clerks in the Pinelands area, and to Secretary of State on December 21st, 2018, and to the Commission officially designated newspapers on December 20th, 2018, and by posting a copy on the Commission's website.
And welcome today, Kristen, being back with us.
Welcome back.
Kristen gets confusing. Nancy, would you please call the roll call?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Commissioner Ashman? Commissioner Avery?
Here.
Commissioner Christie? Commissioner Erlin? Commissioner Howell?
Here.
Commissioner Irick?
Here.
Commissioner Janarone? Commissioner Lloyd?
Here.
Commissioner Lobauer?
Here.
Commissioner Pikaliski?
Here.
Commissioner Quinn? Commissioner Rowan Green?
Present by telephone.
Good morning, Darcy.
Chairman.
Hi, everybody. I missed you.
We miss you,
Chairman
too.
Prickett. Are you here?
I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yeah. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first order of business is to adopt some minutes.
Chairman, I'd like to move that we adopt the minutes as submitted, including the closed session minutes from September 13th and the closed session minutes from August 9th.
Can we exclude in your motion, can you exclude the August 9th?
Yeah, have to.
Candy? Good morning, Candy.
Chairman, I'd like to amend my motion.
Thank you.
Make it to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Okay.
October 11th.
October 11th meeting.
Hello?
Good morning, Candy. We are about to adopt the minutes for October 11th, open session, and September 13th, closed session. Are there any questions or comments on these minutes? Okay, all in favor to adopt these minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, adopted.
Hello?
Candy, what was your vote, Candy? Candy?
Candy,
I can't hear anything.
can you hear me right now?
That's better.
Okay, we are trying to vote to approve the October 11th, 2019 minutes and the September 13th, 2019 closed session minutes.
Okay.
What is your vote? Do you vote to approve? You vote to approve?
Say again.
Are you voting to approve those minutes?
I can't hear you.
Okay, let me try again. Can you vote to approve the September?
Yeah.
Yes, you are voting to approve September 13th, 2019 and September 13th, 2019 closed session and October 11th, 2019 regular meeting.
Yes, I've read those minutes. They're fine.
Okay, so you vote to approve those. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we have one more set of minutes to vote on, right?
We do.
Okay. So
And that is August 9th, closed session minutes.
Second.
Okay, so now we're voting on the August 9th, 2019 closed session minutes. Candy?
Yes, Obviously, I wasn't there,
You can still vote on them if you weren't there, if you reviewed them.
but I have no trouble approving them. They seem correct.
Okay, so Candy's voting yes.
Okay.
What are the rest?
All those in favor?
No.
Well, for the record, I recused myself from this vote because I've recused myself from this pipeline issue for several years.
Correct.
Okay.
Then the rest of everybody else?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And one recusal
And one
or
recusal.
abstention. Okay. Okay.
Recusal. Okay, I'd like to ask commissioners if they would agree to pulling up, advancing the last resolution to this period of time. Since we have two folks on the phone, it might just be better to get this out of the way. The resolution that I'd like to move before the commission next is the resolution addressing the remand of the South Jersey Gas Company application due to a significant change in material fact. Commissioners, is that okay with you? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, I need to recuse myself from this discussion as I did with the other pipeline issue. I will step out.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd.
Candy, can you hear what's going on? I just want to confirm.
No, I can't hear it.
Okay, so we're considering resolution, does it have a number?
Let me,
Not yet. Okay, we're considering the resolution addressing the remand of the South Jersey Gas Company application due to a significant change in material fact.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what we're doing right now. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we allow public comment on this resolution before we have discussion and a vote on it. So if we could allow public comment on that now, rather than after the discussion and treatment of the resolution.
How do other commissioners feel?
Candy, Commissioner Lobauer has made a motion to allow public comment prior to considering this matter.
I second Commissioner Lobauer's request.
Commissioner Irick has seconded the motion.
Okay. Any comments before we take a vote? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Was that an aye from Darcy and Candace? Ashman?
Yes, I cleared aye. Yes.
Okay. So were there any noes?
There were no, it was unanimous, as far as I could tell. Okay, we'll open up the meeting for public comment on that resolution.
Thank you. Jeff Tittle, Director of New Jersey Sierra Club, and it's good to hear your voice, Candy. It's been a while, so I hope everything's going well with you. I'm here today because I'm hoping that one of the saddest chapters in the 40-plus years of the Pinelands will come to an end today with the rescinding of the approvals for the South Jersey gas pipeline. As you know, the Sierra Club is a litigant in this matter. And so we would love to get this case settled and this pipeline basically dismissed. However, you know, we have some concerns with the resolutions and how they're written. And I just wanted to state, you know, very clearly that, you know, this pipeline, we felt from the beginning, and that's a major point of contention, violated the CMP because it did not primarily serve the needs of the Pinelands. It was to serve a power plant that the Sierra Club had been fighting for over 20 years, called the Beale England plant, which is one of the largest sources of pollution, both thermal to the bay and the impact on fisheries, as well as air pollution. And that repowering with natural gas by bringing this pipeline did not serve the needs of the Pines because that electricity was going into the grid. However, you know, that is now mute because of the decision by Rockland Capital not to repower the plant. They probably would have not been able to make any deadlines to get into the PJM auction. We still had points of contention with them on permits for waterfront development and other things. And so they decided, after these, 5 or 6 years, not to repower it. And that's a good thing. Hopefully it'll become a place for offshore wind, for bringing things on, for servicing the windmills off the coast when we get them, hopefully soon. However, now that the plant's not there, there is no justification whatsoever for this pipeline, because the gas in it would not only serve Pinelands, it's really designed for so-called resiliency or reliability in Cape May County, which is all outside the Pinelands. And so, that's, and many of the things in the resolution we support and agree with. However, the concern that we have is that since it now violates the CMP very clearly from the Attorney General's opinion and the opinion of your own attorneys, we believe that the resolution as it's written leaves too much wiggle room for South Jersey Gas to try to amend or come back in with this pipeline in this location or a slightly different location, or maybe shorten it a little bit or do whatever they may do to try to get around this resolution. So we would like to see the resolution strengthened. We'd like to say that, to have it very clearly that this project should violates the CMP and should be dismissed with prejudice because it does not meet the purpose and scope of the CMP. It violates the CMP and should be dismissed with prejudice, not just has to withdraw or stay. So thank you, and hopefully.
Thank you, Mr. Tittle. Please come up. Good morning.
Good morning. Ryan Greck from Pinelands Preservation Alliance. I was encouraged to see a resolution on the agenda today addressing the South Jersey Gas's application. In reading the language of the resolution, however, I was struck by the difference between the resolution about this pipeline's application that was tabled back in April and the current resolution. The current resolution states in the final sentence, "Now therefore be it resolved, because the project has significantly changed, i.e. it will no longer serve BL England, the submitted application no longer addresses the forest area public infrastructure standard of the Pinelands CMP at NJAC 7:50-5.23B12. As a result, SJG may not proceed with the project." Compare that with the final sentence of the April resolution. "Now therefore be it resolved that as the project can no longer be demonstrated to be consistent with the CMP, Pinelands Resolution number PC4-17-03 approving this project is not valid." In April, this board was to specifically vote on the validity of the specific approval resolution. Today, that resolution's validity is not addressed. In April, the resolution clearly stated a lack of consistency with the CMP. Today, there is no such clear statement. I wonder why the deliberate decision was made to edit that language from a strong, unambiguous rejection of the South Jersey Gas pipeline to a vague statement. This resolution should clearly demonstrate the facts, which are that this project is not consistent with the CMP and that the resolution number PC4-17-03 approving the project is not valid. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for allowing the public to comment at this stage. Really appreciate it.
Could you give us your name?
Oh yeah, my name is Georgina Shanley from Ocean City. I agree with Mr. Tittle and Ms. Gretsch. And I have a copy of both resolutions. I'm not sure if the commissioners had an opportunity to actually compare them, because the initial resolution that was tabled in April is much stronger. And the one that is presently on the table is very leaky and subject to challenge. It does not deny or withdraw or revoke the prior approval given to South Jersey Gas, or adequately and specifically ground the Commission's finding in law. And according to this new resolution, South Jersey Gas shall not proceed with the project, which is it leaves it open for challenge. There's also been no public process. And I'm going to refer back to the tape of the September 9th meeting that was presented by the executive director. She stated on the September 9th meeting, 3 members of the staff, the solicitor, Chuck, here, I don't know your last name, and Ms. Wittenberg met with representatives of the South Jersey Gas Company. And this is a direct quote. It's very short, but it's direct, and it's very important. And it gives us pause to wonder about this resolution. It said, South Jersey Gas is still stating that their project is necessary for providing service to whoever that they feel are required by the Board of Public Utilities. So they're saying that the Board of Public Utilities are telling them that this project is necessary to provide the service. We explained again their options for applying: private application, public application being the new process, waiver, compelling public need, waiver. We stressed the need that they would need to consider a different route, can't see any way to get from here to there without where they went before. That would present just land use problems, not violation of the comprehensive management plan, but land use problems. They were grateful for the opportunity to talk, then left. So other than that, that meeting was more us explaining to them what their options were for going forward, and they had nothing to share with us. I'm very concerned about the ability of this company to come in when the Attorney General has declared that this application is void, yet staff time is given to these people to advise them, to give them advice on alternatives. I think there should be some oversight on that by the commissioners. I think we've just learned over the last almost 8 years, it's been a tremendous fight, and now we're down to the last seconds of the game. And what comes up but a very, very weak resolution that's subject to challenge. And if the intention of South Jersey Gas is to supply the needs, nobody knows who needs, of gas to people that the Board of Public Utilities are saying that they should do, we're really left in a very frail position. And I'm very, very, very concerned about the Pinelands and about the staff augmenting this application and leaving gaps open. Why not have the best, firmest resolution possible to protect, preserve, and enhance the Pinelands and put an end to all of this? Thank you.
I would just say that the CNP encourages applicants to come in and meet with staff to discuss current applications, future applications. So that's in the CNP. And as far as oversight is concerned, that was reported at a meeting, that there wasn't a meeting. And I think that possibly is the oversight that we need. But I'm sure commissioners will, if they have any questions or concerns about addressing those two things, we can take that up at a later date. Thank you. Mr. Fishman. I'm going to get the CMP out, like you brought before, and have those here. I usually bring it too, but thank you. Good morning, Mr. Fishman.
Good morning. Arnold Fishman, Medford Lakes. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to address the commission with respect to this. This commission passed a resolution approving the application of South Jersey Gas to do to the Pinelands exactly what your positions and the extensive support systems around you were designed to prevent. Your raising debt was to ensure that the Pine Barrens, a pristine state, historically, nationally, and internationally renowned treasure, would not become the Atlantic City Expressway for pipelines to the ocean. It did so on faulty reasoning. A benefit to one business, the BL England plant, that happened to be on the periphery of the map without any analysis of the pros and cons is not an ipso facto benefit to the Pinelands. Now the business doesn't want the gas, and you are given the rare opportunity to right a wrong. Squandering that golden opportunity, the commission can't see its way clear to close the door. Leaving South Jersey Gas toe in the door is an abdication of responsibility. The resolution you are considering is the equivalent of a stop work order. It suspends activity until a future date. In no way does it rescind the approval contained in the original resolution. There was a prior resolution prepared which did just that. There is no justification for this body, as it is presently constituted, to attempt to bind the hands of future commissions as they may be constituted. There is no justification for not telling South Jersey Gas that if it wants to defile the Pinelands in the future, it would have to start over. The commission has been too slow to end this. It must adopt a resolution embracing the prior language and bring this matter to a screeching halt. Put a fork in it. It's done.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Yes, ma'am.
Agnes Marsala, Chesterfield, New Jersey.
I'm sorry, could you?
Agnes Marsala, Chesterfield, New Jersey. I totally agree with the speakers that came before me. I think this is a weak resolution, and you're leaving the door open purposefully. I mean, I just read SGI's comments to, their call for their investors. And obviously they had this meeting with E.D. Wittenberg to get enough info, enough not as good as a wink to, to tell their investors that, yeah, we're going to go forward with this project because, we got the resolution we needed and we got the stuff in the works behind closed doors or whatever. Yeah, I know E.D. Wittenberg told you about this meeting, but I mean, did she tell you every single thing that went on? Yeah, they had no comments. They went away happy. And they told their investors what they needed to hear to keep them happy on this project. And obviously others. But, you're wasting, I think, taxpayer money because you're going to have to litigate this at some point. We are still in litigation. The AG has said he doesn't want to have any part of this. But obviously, E.D. Wittenberg and council here want this to go through, and they're going to do everything they can to give them that backdoor that they need. So, I feel a little stronger, and my language is a little stronger than the NGOs and the other people. But this is just a continuation of the industry capture that has happened with E.D. Wittenberg, in my opinion. So I would appreciate if you would either table this until after January, where we can maybe get some more people seated that terms are up, that have, positive votes on a stronger resolution, or go back to the stronger resolution that you had considered in April. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marcella. Let's just say that the ED was doing her job. That application cannot move forward without it coming before the commission. Okay, is there anyone else that would like to speak? Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of the commission. My name is Joanne Pannone. I'm a Rutgers environmental steward. I also am an
I'm
amateur.
sorry, could you give me your name again, please?
Joanne Pannone, Pannone, and I'm from Robbinsville, New Jersey.
Thank you.
I'm a Rutgers environmental steward. I'm a Mercer County Master Gardener,
Okay.
and I'm also Pinelands Commission, and most of all, Sierra Club. So I spend a lot of time in the Pinelands with Russ Julick, studying the botanists down there, the flowers, fauna, the birds. And I can remember my father was an iron worker, and this is a little anecdote I always tell. He was so happy when they built the atomic power plant on Oyster Creek because the Union Hall was empty. He was an iron worker. He was busy. But then when they turned it on, they bought the marinas out because it brought worms into the wooden hulls of the boats. This was all new. It was going to be great. It wasn't going to cause any damage to the bay, but we all know what happened to Barnegat Bay. So fast forward to now, we're looking at this gas pipeline. And it just breaks my heart when I go down 539 and see this pipeline going down the road. I support the initial resolution. It had strong language and I also flat out just reject this the pipeline, and that we can stop it now and make a recommendation to Governor Murphy to put a moratorium on all the fossil fuel projects that are coming through. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else that would like to comment? Okay, I want to thank everyone for their comments and close this to public comment, and the commission will continue to consider this resolution.
Candy? You're still there? And Darcy, are you still there? I'm asking if Darcy is there as well. Maybe it lost Darcy.
Oh, I'm here.
Awesome. Do you want to try really quickly? Hang on.
We're about to take, I'm going to ask for a motion for this. Maybe you might want to.
So we have to make sure we have enough.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, if I could for a minute, the language that's in this resolution was agreed to by the commissioners at a meeting. This was their language.
No answer? Okay, so we don't have enough people to take. What? Say again? Does anyone else have another number for Darcy? Other than her cell phone? Oh.
We what? We are.
Should we do other business while we're reading?
It sounds like they have her. So
Let's just wait until.
you'll have to get it back up here if you're the business.
To what?
Okay. Darcy, Rowan Green? Darcy, are you there?
I'm here.
Candy, we got you. Okay, Darcy, are you there? Darcy, are you on mute maybe? Sorry. Okay. Hang in there, Candy.
It's okay, I'm here.
Okay. You recommend that we move forward on those?
I would just wait. They're gonna take more time and then. Okay.
Hi, Darcy.
Darcy, do we have you? Darcy?
You entered access code 6177.
Do we want to try to?
We can move forward with.
And see if we can get them.
Okay.
Okay, so
All right, I think we'll need Ed back.
Closing Dr. Gas for the moment, I guess. Tabling this.
Yes.
We need one person on the phone.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, like someone's iPhone or something like that instead of. Yeah, and put it by microphone instead of that thing that doesn't seem to work so well.
Okay, with the commission's agreement here, I'd like to go back, move forward the Medford application. We don't have our 8 votes yet, but since Ed is here, I understand that. I just want commissioners to know that once we have our 8, I would like to know whether they would be willing to consider the first 2 resolutions that are on the agenda after the staff reports. We'll come back to staff reports. Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
Good.
I wish you could hang here.
Once made an offer on a house from the get-go. So, once made an offer on a house from the funeral, so like worst things that have happened at funerals and stuff. We didn't get the house though, so I think it's like. Yeah, exactly.
Just like to thank everyone's cooperation in this matter. Wish some things happen beyond our control, and this is one of them. So I really appreciate your.
So that one got hung up?
Welcome. This service is provided luxury. You entered 6-1. There is one other participant in the conference. Darcy, you there? Announce yourself. Darcy?
Yes, I'm here. Okay, very good. Get Candy back on Washington.
Okay. All right. So
So Darcy, just to bring you up to speed, we're not doing South Jersey Gas right now.
going to consider first the
sorry.
Medford application resolution and then the
sorry?
second resolution.
Okay, so Darcy, can you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me? Is this on mute or anything? Darcy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we are waiting to get Candy Ashman back on the line. In the meantime, we are putting South Jersey Gas to the side, and we're proceeding with two other applications, the Medford applications.
The Medford application, the first one on the
Present on the
agenda.
phone.
I'm sorry?
Present on the phone.
You're present on the phone, yes. Okay, I just want to make sure you understood what we were doing.
Okay, the first,
You hear that?
first resolution we're going to consider is for the construction of a 23,516 square foot municipal building in
present on
Medford
the
Township.
phone.
I
We
move
gotcha.
that we adopt that resolution, Chairman.
Is there a second? Thank you. Any questions, comments? Darcy, do you have any questions or comments?
Apologies to the commissioners and the staff. I've been present all through the meeting. I apologize, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman,
Apology
and all the
accepted.
commissioners. I'm here.
Okay, so we're about to take the vote on the first resolution on the Medford application. Do you hear that, Darcy? Okay,
Darcy, did you hear that we're taking a vote on the first Medford application?
I vaguely hear you. It's very, very, very dim.
Okay, the first resolution is for the construction of a 23,516 square foot municipal building in Medford Township. The motion was forwarded by Commissioner Lobauer and seconded by Commissioner Pikaliski. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Did she vote yes or no?
I don't know.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
I can hear you, Commissioner Green.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes.
Darcy, we can hear you. We're not sure why you can't hear us.
I am on the phone. I've been on the phone throughout the meeting. Please, Help, Mr. Chairman. I'm on the phone.
Oh, my God.
Darcy, we're gonna call you back on a cell phone. Hang on.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
It's apparent that we didn't have a quorum for that vote.
Well, we'll take the vote again if that's,
I think that's
We're gonna have to.
be required to do, assuming we can get a quorum.
We're gonna try a different way.
thank you, Commissioner Lobauer, for that clarification.
I don't know how much closer I can get. I know.
Township application for the construction of a 23,560 square foot municipal building. Do you have any questions or concerns about that application?
No, sir.
Okay, so all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Darcy, what was your vote?
Yeah, I think,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It was the vote for the,
The second part of it. I will say aye.
it was about the Medford Township 23,516 square foot municipal building. How do you vote on that application?
I think that the quorum, I think the majority was aye, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
so your vote's yes?
Yes.
Okay, so the second application the commission is going to now consider is a resolution containing the Hamilton Township Board of Education, the recreation improvements at the William Davies Middle School, is an application for Hamilton Township, New Jersey Department of Transportation, construction of a stormwater management basin at the intersection of US Route 322 and Cologne Avenue. And finally, the town of Hamilton demolition of a single-family dwelling 50 years or older. We haven't moved the,
Move that we
Mark.
adopt this resolution, Chairman.
okay, Mark and Alan. Okay, so are there any questions or concerns about this resolution? Hearing none.
Yes, yes.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
I'm having another voice in my ear.
Okay.
Yes.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, unanimous. I will. Darcy, would you confirm your vote, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Is that good enough? All right.
Mr. Chairman, if I could,
Yes.
our meeting is becoming a comedy of errors here. I mean, through no fault of anyone here, we're just finding ourselves in a circumstance where the systems are failing us. I don't believe we should proceed with any calls or further resolutions when it's unclear that the people who are trying to participate telephonically can even understand what's going on. I'd ask that we
Would you postpone?
postpone any further voting on
about-
other resolutions until we have a meeting where we can have a physically present quorum to vote on those issues.
How do other commissioners feel about that? So if we would do that, would we need to
I'm not
table
sure
this?
about that. I think that if we can get an opportunity to vote on this today, we should vote on it and put it to bed. We've been postponing and postponing and postponing. You know, I think the public deserves an answer. I think
hear
the
you,
applicant
Darcy.
deserves an answer. I would suggest that we vote on it, but I'm just one opinion.
So if we give it a few more minutes to see if we can get a hold of Commissioner Ashman. I understand your point that it's kind of
Commissioner, I'm
hard.
afraid that if we do take action today, it will only be challenged because anyone could argue just from viewing the streaming record that we're putting out there, that there is no clear understanding. There is no meeting of the minds between what's happening in this room and people trying to participate outside this room. So,
What would can you give me some advice on if we would not take the vote today?
I'm not gonna give you guys notice then.
Uh,
So,
well, I've made a motion. I appreciate we have a second on the motion. Suspend any consideration of further resolutions without a
Okay,
physically
so
present quorum.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Lobauer, you made a motion to what?
To suspend voting on any further resolutions today since we cannot apparently meet quorum.
so to be clear, are you moving to adjourn the meeting?
No, because there's further business on the agenda that I'd like us to consider. It doesn't require us to vote. We have a guest here who wants to give a presentation
You
today.
could be present here and elect from the forum, you could hear from this person.
That's what I'd like to do.
But, so, it's probably less appropriate if that's what you want to do, to move to adjourn. Just be here for the presentation. Adjourn the formal public meeting, because we don't have one. If we don't, we may not, we may not be resolving by. Okay, oh, we do right now. Right. So we don't have to go on the.
So we wouldn't have a quorum to vote on the issue to suspend or table this until the next meeting.
I see.
No. We can't vote on that.
We can't vote. All right, I'll move we adjourn. Is there a second?
Is she watching the live feed? Okay, so the audio on the live feed is fine. As someone who's watched the live feed, it's just that her responses,
I am watching.
so her responses are delayed. So Darcy, is it true that you can hear us, but your responses are delayed?
Yes, there's several minutes delayed.
Yeah, so actually you're hearing everything that people are saying, it just is not in real time.
Yes.
Okay, so that seems like there's enough people to hear.
We don't have the vote.
This is wrong. Okay, but I have the forward the vote, but I don't
Correct.
think it's getting that or hearing it.
We've heard your vote for the first two resolutions, so we're okay with it.
Medford's out of that, all right.
No, the Medford and the second resolution with Hamilton and Hamilton.
And it seems to me that the chairman, vice chairman, they tabled that.
We're discussing what to do with the South Jersey gas resolution.
Not here.
We don't have 8 people for,
Right, and I think that that's been tabled.
no, it hasn't been tabled because we don't have the votes to table it either. The only thing that we may be able to do is adjourn the meeting.
Got it, yes, okay.
I'm sorry, what? The South Jersey gas? Right,
No, that was on the.
yeah.
Right.
May I see procedurally, I'm not going to get into the merits, that we just move forward with the rest of the meeting. We have a quorum. If we can bring the votes back to vote on the issue that I have to recuse myself from, so be it.
Hold on, Darcy.
I just suggest we move forward with the meeting. If we can get a quorum for the resolution, then the commission, without me, can decide what to do.
So why don't we do that? And make a decision
I think that
after
makes
the. Okay. Darcy, we're going to move on with the staff reports, I think, or would you like staff reports?
Staff reports, of course, and I'm looking at the audio on the video. I'm listening to the audio on the video.
Okay.
It's very confusing. I know this is
I can't hear you, Bill.
terrible. I can carry on as expected.
We did
We don't
finish.
have a quorum.
Yeah, we've
There's
got the
only one left.
resolutions, the business.
There's only one left, the South Jersey Gas.
It's not a quorum for the vote.
Okay, so we're good now, Darcy. So
Thank you so much.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
Don't hang up.
Yep. Yep.
Don't hang up. Did she hang up?
She hung up. So can we,
This is, you can keep going, it's just not.
okay, so can we have our staff reports? Is that?
Yes.
We're not voting on that.
Yeah, we're not voting.
Right.
Keep going.
Your phone.
Yeah. I need a drink. Yeah, I will, sure. Are you okay with it?
She's just
Is
glad
that
she grabbed the
helpful?
phone before I could see what that was. So.
I'll send.
All right, so we're going to continue with staff reports. Good morning.
I would just point out that this may be the third meeting where we have made every effort to get quorum in the room. Both
Between all of us.
Myself, Chairman Prickett, Jess Noble, all of us. We have tried. I know that you're here, so I'm preaching to the choir, but I just want the public to know this has been an ongoing issue for us about getting commissioners, sitting commissioners in the room. And it's not for lack of trying on all of our parts. And maybe it's been timing, or I don't know what it is, but we will continue to make every effort to get commissioners in the room. I feel badly about it, and I apologize to everyone because it just seems like a mess, which it is, but we've been trying, and we just cannot get quorum in the room. I think this is the third or fourth month. It's very frustrating. It's not the equipment. We've had other calls with other people, and it works fine. Darcy had the live stream going. Let's be honest, Candy's elderly. It's very difficult, and they don't hear well. But we've had other calls in here, and we are looking into a new system. It's expensive. It's going to take us a while. We are trying. Maybe we can get it, where's Lynch? I don't know. Maybe we can get some temporary system, but we shouldn't be relying on people on the phone. It's our frustration, and I apologize. And it hasn't just been, Chairman weighed in. I apologize. I'm a mess.
Thank you. Thank you. Executive Director.
Now my report.
Can you get it together?
Yeah. I'm together. So, John Bonnell, Chief Scientist, and I were called to a meeting with Assemblyman Dancer we weren't quite sure of the agenda, as is not uncommon when a legislator reaches out to you. Turns out it was with representatives of Jersey Central Power and Light. They wanted to talk about the right-of-way program. And I think, as we've mentioned to you over the years, this is a 10-year-old program, a pilot project we've been doing with the utilities on maintaining rights-of-way and how they do it to make sure we maintain and keep Pinelands habitat. And the utilities over the 10 years have continuously said they would like to use herbicides. We have continuously said that's too big of a thing for us to consider as part of the pilot. It would be another thing. So that's what this meeting was about. They continue to want to do that. Mr. Bonnell and I explained all the reasons why that's an issue for us and how our rules are set up. And you'll be hearing from us soon on the right-of-way project because it's ending. The pilot is ending. It actually ended the end of September. So we'll be coming in for recommendations for what we're going to do with that project. But it was an interesting meeting. And it's interesting to know that that's still going to be their issue at the end of the day. So we had that meeting, and I think that's all I have to report on. really down.
I will want to just add to that. The monthly report has this information and even more. So recommend, it's online. I read it last night.
I appreciate your continuing to support our new monthly report. We're very proud about it. It's really good. I like it. Glad you like it. And again, I always tell people, if there's anything else you want to see in it, let us know. We're trying to keep it manageable, but if we're missing anything, we'll add stuff.
Great.
And we've been moving some stuff that used to be in the packet into the monthly report because we feel like that way people are paying more attention to it because it was getting buried, like lists of things that we never really discussed with you. So it's been a good effort, and thank you.
Thank you. Larry,
Good morning.
Director Liggett, yes. Good morning.
We continue to monitor the Infrastructure Trust Fund process with the state. They've had a stakeholder meeting. We went as a stakeholder, not many issues dealing with the Pinelands. They did raise an interesting issue, and that was how long should people wait for an application to be submitted for the project? We selected projects, we told the people that they can do it, and then the question now is, well, what if they don't want to do it? And it just sits there. So we'll think about that a little bit more. How long should you wait before we come back to you and say maybe we should take more action, fund somebody else or something? The Kirkwood Cohansey, we had another meeting with DEP. This is first or the second or third, but we had a fairly good attendance, mostly staff people. And we went through what we are intending to propose, what we've told you, and it was pretty good. They had a couple questions. They were generally favorable. They asked the question, are we sure that we're going to have enough water for the future? And Gina's looking at that. And then they had some questions about thresholds, and there will be in the rules. But we'll summarize those and see if we have changed, and then we're going to come back to you. So we are making some progress, but we've been to DEP. And I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Larry. Chuck?
Good morning, commissioners, members of the public. Just a couple of items to note. Rather unique project in Galloway Township, commonly referred to as Blue Heron East. It's right on Tilton Road in Galloway Township. They had previously secured approval for more than 900 dwelling units. They have not moved forward on that application. The applicant has decided to abandon the project, rescind their municipal approvals. The unique aspect of it was the applicant had already imposed a number of conservation deed restrictions on the property to address a commission issue with threatened and endangered species, but also a number of other conservation easements to address township issues. When the applicant decided to rescind the approvals, they had to go through a process, which they're in now, of removing the deed restrictions. And last week there was a public hearing down in Galloway Township that involved members of the Department of Environmental Protection, the Green Acres program, a process that the applicant has to go through in an attempt to remove those deed restrictions. I wanted to note on the next item is that we met with Pemberton Township officials earlier this week. Pemberton Township, I had discussed probably over a year ago, has a park they're trying to develop. They had acquired a parcel. It was a fallow agricultural field. It turned out that a significant portion of the parcel was wetlands that severely restrict the amount of development that could occur out there. The township has continued to try to find a path forward to construct some recreational improvements. We met with the officials earlier this week. We think we have found some process that meets, some approach that meets our regulatory standards that will allow some of the development to occur. Ultimately, that'll wind up here at the commission as a public development application. Just a general issue that I wanted to mention that comes up from time to time. We're contacted, and this happened again this week, for the disposal of dredge spoils in the Pinelands area. The disposal of dredge spoils, under your definition, constitutes development because it's fill and it requires application to the Pinelands. We've had any number of instances over the past few years where we receive these inquiries. Part of the filing an application to dispose of the dredge spoils in the Pinelands area, it has to be demonstrated that there aren't any contaminants in the dredge spoils, and it will not degrade Pinelands groundwater quality, which is a standard in our rules. To date, just about all of the testing that we have received from dredge spoils is somewhat understandably, there's contaminants in them, just because of the nature of the product. So we continue to receive those inquiries. We continue to give the same guidance. Was it could be permitted if it's demonstrated that you meet all the standards of the Pinelands. To date, that has not happened. And the last thing I just wanted to mention is that we did have another pre-application conference to establish a soccer facility on agricultural production lands in Chemung Township. Commissioners may remember that at a prior meeting, I indicated we had a pre-application conference of parcel in Southampton Township that's also in the agricultural production area for soccer facilities. That one has not moved forward, and we'll see whether the one in Chemung moves forward or not. That's all I had to report.
Thank you, Director Horner. Much appreciated.
Question. I'm not convinced that dredged spoils should be permitted in any Pinelands area. What can be done to amend the CMP, or what steps can be taken to avoid repository of dredged spoils?
So the way the CMP regulations are constructed at the moment, it really addresses most of the issues that would be raised by any type of fill activity that would occur in the Pinelands. So to say that a little differently, that if someone proposed to place fill on their parcel, not dredge spoils, but fill on their parcel currently, that would be permitted in the Pinelands. We would review it for wetlands, wetland buffers, to make sure that it's not contaminated, that it met the groundwater quality standard, to make sure grading was appropriate. So the hypothetical issue of placing fill unto itself does not currently raise an issue with the Commission's regulations. And for example, when parks are built in the Pinelands, fill commonly occurs. So when you transfer that approach to dredge spoils, if in fact the dredge spoils are demonstrated not to be contaminated, I'm not sure, in my opinion, that it'd be any different than any other fill that we would permit. But I think the Commission can take some solace, at this point at least, in the fact that just by their nature, dredge spoils tend to be contaminated. And it's very, very difficult to demonstrate that that won't degrade Pinelands groundwater quality standard. Did I answer your question, Commissioner?
Yes. My point, however, is that a lot of fill is brought to sites as part of development, construction. This would be a standalone depository of dredged material without any other development. And so therefore the propensity for large volumes of material to be deposited in the Pinelands causes some concern.
I understand.
Thank you.
David?
I'm relying on my memory now over 30 years. And I'm getting older. I will answer. I cannot think of any instance where the Commission has approved the placement of dredge spoils in the Pinelands area.
Chuck, I just have a question about the techniques that are used to measure the dredge spoils. Is that really for the applicant's engineer to say, to verify that they don't have contaminants? Does the Commission review any techniques that are used, sampling techniques?
A little bit outside of my area of expertise. If you have additional questions on this, Mr. Chairman, I would have to look to others on our staff. But we require that testing be done. Mr. Demon, who is present today, he may be able to contribute to this discussion. The Department of Environmental Protection has something called the They test for 60 priority pollutants is a mandatory test for dredge spoils. And that information is what we require to demonstrate whether or not the dredge spoils are going to meet our water quality standards. Mr. Deeman, did you have anything else to add on that one?
No, typically testing is done for DEP and other agencies. DEP plus the primary pollutants. We just ended up getting the results. As Chuck mentioned, typically show elevated levels of number of elevated, and therefore takes out the possibility of bringing them to the
Great. Thank you. That's really the information I was looking for. Thanks. Yes.
Just wanted to follow up with Nancy's discussion of right of way. I'd like to see us consider the impact of right of way on fires, given what's happened in California, given that the utility was involved in that. So as we go forward, I'd like to make part of the discussion the prevention, if you will, of forest fires to the extent we can.
The interesting thing is, and that's because we're going to be doing this soon, but the work they're doing is to keep the right-of-way clear so it doesn't get to the wire. So, so this is all part of that. But yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, Commissioners, I didn't ask if you had any questions for either the Executive Director or Director Liggett. Any questions for either of those folks? Okay, Susan, nothing today? Thank you. All right. Well, thanks, folks, for your reports. And we didn't have a P&I meeting this week or this month, so there's nothing to report on that. I think that leads us to the public comment where the record is not closed, and the public comment would be on application number 1985-0725.003. It's in Medford Township, 2-lot subdivision, and no further development in Medford Township. Does anybody from the public want to come up and comment on that application before the record is closed? Seeing none, close public comment on that matter. I'd like to ask commissioners if they have any questions on the master plans that the executive director has found no substantial issue. One in Barnegat Township, 2 in Corbin City, and 1 in Egg Harbor Township, and the last one in the Township of Hamilton. Commissioner, do you have any questions on any of those matters that were reviewed by the executive director and she found no issues? Okay. So is there anything else I might have forgotten, or can we move on to the end of the agenda? All right. So we have a speaker today, and I'm going to ask Commissioner Lloyd to introduce the speaker. And we're certainly looking forward to hearing what he has to say.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Michael Gerard, to the commission, and Michael, to welcome you to the commission. Professor Gerard is the Andrew Sabin Professor of Practice at Columbia Law School. He teaches climate change law, energy law, environmental law, and a number of other topics in that field. He is also the founder and director of the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law at the law school. He has served as chairman of the faculty at the Earth Institute. The Earth Institute is an institute at Columbia that brings together people, every professor doing environmental work throughout the university, engineers, scientists, lawyers, and he served as the chair of that, the faculty for that. He is a prolific writer. He's edited and published over 13 documents, the 2 of which are global climate change law, global climate change in the U.S. law, which is the primary source of information on that. And the most recent publication is the decarbonization of the planet. I don't think that's quite the title, but it deals with many of the issues that we're trying to address today. Michael, thank you for coming. I'm sorry for the disorganization this morning. This is not typical, but welcome.
No problem.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. What I'd like to do is to start by fairly quickly going through some slides that show the trends and projections for climate change, and then introduce some topics that I hope all of you will want to discuss about actions that the Pinelands Commission can take with respect to climate change. So, global carbon dioxide emissions have continued to go up, even though there have been a number of international agreements that have set targets for reducing the increase in emissions, and they have them go down. That hasn't happened yet. The emissions have continued to go up globally. As a result of that, the levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere have also continued to go up. Here, measured in parts per million, we see that each year the parts per million of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are going up. They're now around 409 or 410 parts per million. Some scientists say that the safe level would be 350. We passed that a long time ago, and we continue to go up. Largely as a result of that, temperatures continue to go up. This chart shows global average temperatures going back to 1860. We see that we have year-to-year fluctuations, but the trend is unmistakable. And in fact, the last month, October, appears to have been the warmest October in recorded history, the warmest October that humanity has experienced since at least the middle of the 19th century. And that trend is continuing to go up. So to cope with this situation, all the countries in the world, as you all know, gathered in Paris exactly 4 years ago and reached the Paris Climate Agreement, under which each country put on the table a voluntary, non-binding, unenforceable pledge for what it was going to do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The convention also agreed that the maximum tolerable increase in global average temperatures would be well below 2 degrees Celsius, which is 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and that effort should be made to try to keep it down to 1.5 degrees. There was unfortunately a disconnect between the pledges that were made by each country and the temperature goal. So let me show you that. These are projections about global greenhouse gas emissions out to the year 2050. The top line in red is a continuation of business as usual. That is the trend we are on. And in recent years, that is where global greenhouse gas emissions have actually been. Below that is a green line, which shows what happens if we have, if certain policies that are on the books but are not necessarily implemented are carried out. Then we see two parallel shorter lines. Those are the pledges. Those are the voluntary, non-binding, non-enforceable pledges that all the countries made. The upper one in blue is the unconditional pledges, and then there's a lower one, which are pledges by some of the developing countries conditional on getting the money for it from the developed countries. The long line below that is where we would need to be on a pathway to 2 degrees, and the bottom line is where we would need to be on a pathway to 1.5 degrees. Now, one of the other decisions that was made in Paris 4 years ago was to ask the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, this body of scientists around the world, to study what the difference is between 2 degrees and 1.5 degrees. The small island nations were saying that 2 degrees isn't good enough because at 2 degrees we think we're going to be underwater. So the IPCC did a study which it released just over a year ago, which showed that indeed there is a profound difference between 2 degrees and 1.5 degrees, and we really need to be aiming at 1.5 degrees. We are now at about 1 degree. The current global temperatures are about 1 degree above centigrade, above pre-industrial conditions, and we're already seeing unprecedented intensity of hurricanes, intensity of precipitation, heat waves, the wildfires at 1 degree. And so the IPCC report made it clear that we need to really try very hard to stay to 1.5 degrees. But you see where we really are, instead of that bottom line, is the top line. And so all of that is showing two things. One, the urgency of everyone doing everything they can to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And the second is to prepare for what is probably coming, adaptation to climate change, since the odds are that we'll end up more toward the top than the bottom line unless extraordinary measures are taken. So in terms of how the U.S. is doing to meet these objectives, this shows U.S. greenhouse gas emissions out to 2030. The solid black line is what they actually were during that period. And then we see projections going forward. And there's an uncertainty range. That acronym is land use change, and forestry. So there's uncertainty, but that's the range. The dotted line you see, the 17% below 2005, is the pledge that President Obama made in the Copenhagen Climate Conference in 2009. The lower line, 26 to 28% below 2005, is the pledge that President Obama made in Paris 4 years ago. So it looks like we're probably going to meet the Copenhagen pledge, but we're way off the Paris pledge. Even the Paris pledge is not nearly enough. Many of you remember that in 2009, the House of Representatives narrowly passed the Waxman-Markey bill, which would have been an economy-wide cap and trade bill, but it died in the Senate. So this is going out to 2050, and what we're seeing here is, again, on the left is what the actual emissions have been, the Copenhagen pledge, the Paris pledge, and then what Waxman-Markey would have done. Waxman-Markey would have put the U.S. on a pathway that's roughly the equivalent of a 2-degree pathway. So all of the emissions trends are very far from where we need to be. In terms of what has actually been happening with the climate itself in the United States and what the projections are going forward, the most authoritative report on that is the Fourth National Climate Assessment, which was released a little over a year ago by a congressionally mandated federal task force of a dozen federal agencies that released this report during the Trump administration. And so this shows the various scenarios that report showed for sea level rise going out to the year 2100. And the range goes up to 8 feet by 2100, depending, and the uncertainty is primarily for two reasons. One is we don't know what global emissions are going to be out that far. And secondly, there are a lot of uncertainties about what's happening with the Greenland and West Antarctic ice sheets. And depending the rate of their melting, and the recent information is not very encouraging, a combination of those things will tell us whether we're closer to 8 feet or less by the end of the century. And obviously, the end of the century, it doesn't stop. It keeps on going up. And under the same report, sea level rise is not the same everywhere on the planet. You have variations due to geology, to wind patterns, to other factors. But the east coast of the United States, it has especially high projected sea level rise. And sea level rise is not the end of it, because you have the mean sea level, but then you have high tides, and then you have storm tides on top of that. So if your house is 8 feet above sea level and there's 6 feet of sea level rise, doesn't mean you're safe. You still have storm surge and other things to worry about. Extreme precipitation is another factor that has been going on. So already, if we look in the upper right panel, over the last 50 years, there have been increases in extreme precipitation, and in this region, it's 55% increase in extreme precipitation events in this region. And then in the lower right, under a high emission scenario, a continuation of business as usual, we could have another 40 to 50% increase in extreme precipitation, which has profound implications for stormwater and drainage systems, among many other things. The same kind of idea, projected changes, and this is a natural consequence because every time the temperature goes up, the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere goes up even more, and therefore there's more precipitation that comes down. Sea level rise, some projections for Atlantic City over the last century. Sea level has risen 1.3 feet. Projections in the years to come higher than that. Temperature projections for here, temperature trends in New Jersey. Again, you have annual variations, but an unmistakable trend. And we see some projections going forward, depending on what the emission scenarios are. Again, this is specifically for New Jersey. We see what the actual temperatures have been and the range of projected future temperatures, and we see at the higher emissions projections, which would be a continuation of business as usual, we could have average temperatures that are 8 to 14 degrees Fahrenheit above what they were early in the last century. And these are just average, and here we see similar things on a national basis, similar kind of projections. So these are just the average temperatures. What's really has the worst impacts are the heat waves when you get into the extremes. And when the average moves to the right, the extremes move to the right. And so you have an increase in average temperatures, and it means that that heat waves are higher and longer. Now, the good part of this is fewer people freeze to death, but it does mean that you have much more danger, and extreme heat is really the climate phenomenon that is the most lethal in the United States and around the world so far. Then wildfires have also increased, and that same national report attempted to distinguish what would be happening with wildfires without climate change and the additional contribution of climate change in causing drier conditions, and often, especially seriously, wet conditions that cause a lot of vegetation, and then dry conditions that dry it out and make it almost kindling, and then the higher base conditions, and so the wildfires are really getting worse. So in terms of methods within this state of trying to control it, 42% of the greenhouse gas emissions in New Jersey come from transportation, passenger vehicles, heavy duty, trucks, buses, everything else. Electricity generation is 19%, commercial and industrial 17%, residential 6%. And so on. And then it's reduced by about 8% from terrestrial carbon sequestration, from the CO2 that is absorbed by the pinelands and by the other vegetation in the state. So Ed mentioned my most recent book, which is called Legal Pathways to Deep Decarbonization of the United States. And it's based on a technical report that was done about 5 years ago by a bunch of scientists and engineers. And they identified 3 pillars of deep decarbonization, 3 pillars of what we need to do to move away from fossil fuels and thereby greatly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. First pillar is energy efficiency, trying to make all of our operations as efficient as possible. The second is decarbonization of the electricity supply, moving entirely away from coal, moving away from using natural gas to make electricity unless it is accompanied by carbon capture and sequestration, which is a technology that is not yet utilized at the commercial scale anywhere in the world for natural gas electricity generation. So moving entirely to renewables and nuclear so that you have a zero carbon electricity supply. And then the third is moving away from liquid and gaseous fuels to electricity. electrify as much as you can, led by the transport sector, which requires ultimately, when we replace out motor vehicles, moving to electric cars, possibly hydrogen fuel cell, but that's less likely. Also electrifying building heating and cooling and water heating to the extent that that's possible. So those are the three basic pillars. And one way that they interrelate is that if we do electrify all these things, it means that overall we're going to have to nearly double the amount of electricity we supply. Because instead of powering transport by gasoline and diesel, we'd be powering it by electricity. We need a lot more electricity. So in translating these three pillars into actions, first on the energy efficiency side, clearly new buildings need to be built to be as not only as energy efficient as possible, but also to be to have their heating and cooling and water heating supplied by electricity to the extent that that's possible. And existing buildings need to be retrofit, which is obviously a more challenging task, but it is an essential one. And one element of doing that is conducting energy audits on them to figure out how are they leaking, how can they be better insulated, other ways to make them more efficient, but also looking into the ways that their heating systems can be altered. There's only limited state power over appliance standards. Under federal law, the Department of Energy sets energy efficiency standards for appliances. States are free to set their own standards for appliances that aren't subject to federal standards, and there are a bunch that are not yet subject to federal standards. Here, California has been a leader in setting its own energy efficiency standards where there isn't preemption. But states would have the ability to require that within the range of appliance standards to require the most efficient appliances. And so there are the EPA and the Department of Energy have the Energy Star program, which rates certain appliances being especially energy efficient, and it is within a state's power to require that that new appliances be Energy Star, and certainly a state agency has the ability to specify that all the equipment it's going to acquire will be up to Energy Star standards. So those are a number of the things that could be done at the state level with respect to energy efficiency. With respect to decarbonization of the electricity supply, fortunately, the price of solar photovoltaic cells has been plummeting in recent years. It's only a fraction now of what it was just a decade ago, and wind energy has also experienced a very profound decline in cost. And so one of the clearest things that can be done is to have as much rooftop solar as possible, requiring it whenever you have the authority to do that, and starting with the buildings that agencies own, but to the extent that the commission has the legal authority to require areas within its overall geographic scope to require rooftop solar whenever that is physically possible and you have the right angles and don't have shading and so forth. It's also possible to use land on existing sand, old sand and gravel mines, other degraded land, other land that might be available, parking lots, so forth for solar. And we're going to need a very large amount of large-scale offshore wind, and the state of New Jersey has plans to do that. The wind farms tend to be so far offshore, like 30 miles, that they're not visible from the shoreline, so they don't have the visual kinds of issues that some people object to. But the power has to come in by cables, and there are currently controversies in New York with offshore wind about where the cable lands, and some people don't want the cable to land near their home. So that's an issue that's going to have to be dealt with. But the amount of new renewable energy we're going to need, when a combination of phasing out the fossil generated electricity and providing the electricity for electrifying transport and buildings is a very large amount of new renewable energy. And then finally, on the electrification front, in order to achieve the objective of a transition over time to electric vehicles, one of the necessities will be a charging infrastructure so that people can plug in and recharge their cars. The scenarios do not envision people having to get rid of their cars before their useful life, but they do envision that when it's time to get rid of your old car, you get an electric car as the replacement, but people will only do that if they have confidence that they'll be able to recharge it. And we're seeing constant improvements in the in battery technology, in the range that a particular car can have. The prices of electric cars are going down. I think that's clearly going to continue. But one thing that state agencies and municipalities can do is in their own facilities build charging facilities, and to the extent that they have the authority to do that, to require at least new construction of commercial buildings and apartment buildings and so forth to be equipped with charging stations. It also contributes if buildings have energy storage that allows the energy that is generated, for instance, by rooftop solar to be available at night and to reduce the need for diesel generators, for generators, the fossil generators. And then I already mentioned electrification of buildings and heating and cooling and water heating. The final slide that I have concerns adaptation to the climate change that is coming. And as I indicated, the projections are much more extreme precipitation, and that's going to require serious looks at the capacity of drainage systems, of stormwater systems, expansion of retention basins, all kinds of measures to prevent this extreme precipitation that is coming, to minimize the flooding that results from that. And it also suggests that looking at the elevation of homes, not just on the coastline, but also along rivers and other areas that are especially vulnerable to flooding. And then fire, we've all been horrified by the stories coming out of California, and it's clear that a number of major factors have gone into it. The cycle that California experienced of a lot of rain, followed by a dry season and a lot of heat, creating tinderbox conditions is one important factor. Another important factor is the wildland-urban interface, as it's called, allowing houses to be built right up against the tree line. And when houses are built right by the trees, it makes the houses more vulnerable. It also inhibits the practice of allowing natural burns, because of course the wildlife ecology of many areas evolved with fires happening from time to time. They depend on that. But if you have to put the fires out because there are houses next to it, it means that when a fire does happen, there is the understory that might usually have been burned in these smaller natural fires or the prescribed burns is still there, and it's kindling and it causes greater fires. So the issue of prescribed burns and of keeping buffer zones between development and the forest is very important. So there's a whole range of issues that need to be paid serious attention to if the phenomenon that has been occurring in California is not to recur in some of the eastern forests. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Chairman? Mr. Jordan, thank you very much for making the trek over and talking to us about this. I don't have a question, but I did want to make a statement. I took the opportunity to look at a summary of your book, Legal Pathways to Decarbonization in the U.S. And you make, you and the authors you've edited in that book together with Mr. Dernbach, make dozens of policy recommendations, concrete things that a variety of entities can do, from federal government to state government to local government agencies to NGOs to, the citizenry who are actively interested. And I've been going through those and pulling out recommendations that I think would be pertinent to the Pinelands Commission. And I intend to submit those in a memo to our executive director, who can hopefully, circulate that to our climate change committee so that we can start to take some direct action following some of the recommendations that you're making there, which I think will be directly pertinent to making sure that the project applications that come here are considered with a view toward their impact on climate, as well as our very operations, the work that we do, the buildings that we have here in this complex, making sure that that's consistent with mitigation of climate change. So I wanted to thank you for not only coming, but for writing that book and making those suggestions available to us.
Thank you, Mr. Lobar. I'm very pleased to hear that. Let me just say that, so the book itself is 1,200 pages, but we have a summary volume that is a mere 160 pages.
Yeah.
And that's available for free download, and I'll be happy to circulate the link so people can download that if they want, and I'd also be happy, if anybody's interested, to make the slides available.
We are.
Okay. And I'll send you the link to this.
Are there other questions? Well, let's finish up here and then I'll get advisement from the commission.
Michael, the one negative contribution forest sequestration was on that chart. Are there ways that we can increase the use of forest sequestration to increase the Pinelands as a carbon sink?
Yes, I first want to say I'm the furthest thing from a forest ecologist, but a forest ecologist do tell me that there are lots of forest management techniques in terms of what's of clearing away dead trees and bushes, other kinds of management issues that do have the ability to enhance the sequestration. And there are also many, many changes to agricultural practices, soil management. Soil management has a profound impact on overall greenhouse gas emissions, especially nitrogen oxide. And so there are ways to make the soil a net sink rather than source of greenhouse gases. And there are many techniques available for that. And that's one of the chapters of the book gets into that in tremendous detail.
I had a question about a comment you made about hydrogen power.
I'm sorry?
Hydrogen power. Hydrogen power, and you expressed that electric power perhaps had more potential than hydrogen. And I was just wondering what the basis of that comment was.
So either one requires an infrastructure, and drivers need to be satisfied that they'll be able to recharge their vehicle when they do it. There is very little development in that in the East. There is an effort led by Toyota in California to develop a hydrogen infrastructure. It may be a situation like VHS versus Betamax. You have two dueling technologies and one of them is going to win. I think most people feel that electricity is more likely to win out than hydrogen, but that is not yet certain. Hydrogen does have certain potentials. One particular potential is that when you have surplus power, so at nighttime you have wind turbines and there isn't enough demand for it, you can use that surplus power to make hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very useful storage device. So I'm not writing off hydrogen, but I think most people feel that electricity is more likely to be the prevailing technology.
Maybe more of the research has been done for electricity as opposed to hydrogen at this point.
Yes, that is certainly the case, that more research and more, and we have obviously a lot of commercial application of electric vehicles. I just bought one, and much less on the hydrogen side. But it may be that the hydrogen technology will develop quickly, and if the economics work out, maybe we'll see a lot more of that.
Is there, I guess you talked about battery technology. Is there more advancement that can take place with battery power that maybe is in the research at the moment in the pipeline that might come to fruition? I know I have a number of concerns with battery power. When the batteries wear out, what happens to them? Can they be reprocessed? And maybe you can't answer that question, but it was just something that comes to mind when I think about batteries in cars.
There's an enormous amount of research and entrepreneurial activity right now happening on development of battery technologies. The traditional electric car used the old-fashioned lead-acid batteries. The Tesla instead puts together a very large number of lithium-ion batteries, which are the batteries that power our cell phones and other devices. There are other technologies that are being developed, and so there are a number of projections that in the years to come, batteries will have much more storage capacity and be lighter per unit of electricity. About a third of the weight of a Tesla is the battery. And so to the extent that that can be made more compact in their different storage technologies, but there have been a lot of encouraging signs about the development of that kind of technology.
It's good to hear. I'm a little concerned about pollution with lithium, and what happens to it, if the battery, if it can be reused over and over. So that's a concern I have. I'm glad to hear that there are other technologies out there that might replace lithium. I did review your book, and I found that out of all the chapters in the book, there were maybe 5 that had to do with carbon sequestration. I thought that was interesting because that's something every locality can work on. How can they sequester more carbon? And I think here in the Pinelands, you mentioned soil, getting more of the carbon in the soil. I think that's important. And also, of course, managing the forest here. We have a different forest from other areas in that, it's based on fire. And except for the cedar forest that can exist for a long period of time, 200, 300 years and hold on to that carbon. But the pines and the oaks, they have to deal with the fire and hold on to as much of the carbon as possible, which I think they have in the past. Which also reminds me of the pygmy forest, where I think much of the carbon is in the roots. And that's something that I think we have to maybe focus on. But I'd like to see more chapters on sequestration, maybe make your volume even more voluminous. Would you?
I'm not promising another book, but
looks like a lot of work. Would you be able to answer some questions from the public?
I'd be happy to.
Okay, and commissioners, would you be willing to open up for a public question?
Motion, we open up to the public.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, yes. Would you like to come sit down, or? Yes, we have a spot over here, if you'd like to come up and join us. Dais? That's good, whatever's comfortable.
My name is George Fluke. I live in Robbinsville, have a small farm in Robbinsville, 50 years or so. And the question I have, it's not a question and statement, but the fracking side of the fence is still a major problem. Pools of greenhouse gases sit at the base of our oceans, and they're being held in check because of the relative temperature of the ocean. So when you looked at our graphs here of going up in an exponential mode, many years out, we go, well, I'll be dead then, it doesn't matter, but I have so many people who tell me that, and I get quite upset. But the fracking actually, in fracking areas, the methane gases have increased dramatically through a whole acres and acres of small fissures that come up. So So I'm not sure on the charts that the potential of with the 2-degree Celsius temperature problem relative to the ocean temperatures releasing, and that's of course some people refer to that as the trigger, the automatic trigger mechanism that says we've got so many years to stop this, and if we don't, it becomes an automatic generation. So the problem I have in the pipelines wasn't the pipeline in the local sense as much as it is that it prolongs the existence of the possibility of keeping our fossil fuel companies moving along. Okay, but what happens if we hit the trigger point and we think, well, it's a bridge fuel, but the fracking itself is really the problem. Now, we don't frack in New Jersey, but it's a global world, so I'm concerned obviously natural sequestration is wonderful. I mean, it's a wonderful thing that we can do in the pine barrens here. So, but when you got to put down a deep well injection system, that in itself, having one of those deep well systems in a valley, and all of a sudden some geological shift takes place and people live in that valley. I remember Los Angeles 50 years ago when it was clean, clear air. And I finally realized why was smog taking place in Los Angeles? And it wasn't because of cars. It was because everybody in Los Angeles burnt their garbage. My great-grandmother lived 2 blocks from the Coliseum. Every backyard had one of those steel pyramid things, and boy, they burnt their garbage. Because I was going out there 52 every 2 years for the next 10 years. So I saw a transition. And then the cars came, and then the people came, and then the highways came. But it was garbage burning, and it was trapped. So I think of the sequestration. I say, hey, if you were in a valley and you were trapped, we'd have lots of situations like that. Thanks for letting me talk about this.
Did you have a question?
I really don't. It was more of a statement. I wanted to know whether or not on the charts, though, was the methane gas release calculated or measured as a factor?
Sure. If I could just make 2 comments. One other finding of the technical report on which we based our legal report is that it's important not to get into emission reduction dead ends of technology pathways that have short-term emissions reductions, but in the long term stop the emissions reductions. And the principal one of those is natural gas. That conversion from coal to natural gas certainly does reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but once you're stuck with natural gas, it's still a fossil fuel that is emitting greenhouse gases. So a continued transition toward natural gas leads you to a dead end where you're no longer able to further reduce emissions. So that's one of the real concerns is a stranded infrastructure for natural gas that could get in the way of achieving the objectives. The other comment I wanted to make is that the concern about methane emissions from fracking is a very real one. It is different from the concern about the release of methane from the seabed, and that is mostly a concern about permafrost. That is, the permafrost melts, that large amounts of methane may be released. And that is one of the worst case scenarios, which is actually not reflected in the sea level rise projections. That the maximum sea level rise projection of those charts was due to emissions and Greenland and West Antarctica. Did not reflect the additional sea level rise that could happen if there is a large scale methane release from permafrost.
Thank you. Mr. Fishman? Could you come up to the microphone?
Arnold Fishman,
Thank you.
Medford Lakes. I've been told that with respect to electric vehicles, that whether or not that's a real savings depends upon how the electricity is being generated. If the power station is dirty, then all you've done is change the pollution point from the exhaust pipe to the power station, and I'd like to know whether you agree with that. And secondly, has there been any progress made with respect to nuclear fusion?
So with respect to the first one, there's no question that the amount of greenhouse gas reduction you get from an electric vehicle is closely tied to where the electricity comes from. But even if it's coming from a coal-fired power plant, you're still ahead because the technology is such that an electric vehicle is much more efficient at converting energy into movement than a internal combustion engine. But unquestionably, if you have a clean electricity source, it's immensely better, and that's why you have the linkage of the decarbonizing the electricity supply and the electrification of all these uses. On the nuclear fusion issue, nuclear fusion seems to be one of those technologies that is 20 years away from commercial application and has been for half a century. So there continues to be R&D with nuclear fusion, but when it actually hits commercial scale, it seems to be decades away. There is also progress on other technologies called small modular nuclear reactors, which aren't fusion, but they seem to be much better than the current technology. But those also seem to be at least a decade from commercial application, more than that. But R&D is proceeding on that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Agnes, right?
Agnes, I'm sorry. Thank you. That was a great presentation. I think maybe my question goes to, with respect to the CMP, which I'm not sure, I haven't read every word of it, but doesn't really address climate change per se. That maybe a recommendation might be, in light of all this, to consider amending it to consider climate change and to not advocate, or to advocate for no, development that includes that could include potentially a rise in climate change and the temperature, such as pipelines in dead-end technologies that you're talking about, like methane. So, maybe in light of this information, and in respect to the commission here, new wording might be in the future for an amendment to the CMP to include these things. What would your thoughts be on that?
Well, I'll just say that there are municipalities and regional bodies around the country that are doing exactly that with their land use master plans, revising the master plans to reflect climate change, both mitigating reducing greenhouse gas emissions and adapting to the climate change that is coming. Both are essential elements, and we're seeing a lot of that kind of planning activity happening around the country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes. Georgina?
Georgina Shanley, thank you very much. That was very good. And thank you to the commissioners for having this, for inviting this expert. Regarding the Pinelands, just like you have to approve development projects in the Pinelands, is it within your purview to include that they have to have efficiency or solar panels? If it's going to be in the Pinelands, can you require that they have more fuel efficiency within their buildings and solar panels?
Well, is this a question and answer at this point? We really would like our speaker to answer the questions.
But it's your, since in light of
we
what
have a
he's
speaker
saying.
here today.
Okay, I'm going to ask him a question too. Okay. With regards to the climate change, how will it affect the aquifer and the ecological situation in the Pinelands with plants and animals and insects.
Well, I can't get too specific, but I would say that we are seeing profound impacts on insect populations, partly from climate change, partly from pesticides, partly from all kinds of other influences. We are seeing that many aquifers around the world are, depending on the origins of the water, are drying up, and if they're close to the coastlines, we're seeing more saltwater intrusion. So, but it's very sort of site specific. But there are lots of negative ecological impacts that are happening in many different kinds of forest regimes.
Yeah, just thinking of the Pinelands and what could be done to shore up the aquifer, to preserve it. There's always a balance with the wind and the batteries, and then you've got the rare metals and the human rights issues involved with mining. It's always the lesser of evils. And just one last thing, in Ireland, where I'm from, they are beyond their limits with greenhouse gases due to methane from agriculture, from the animals in Ireland. So that's just another. Okay, thank you.
Shannon, thank you. Yes. Ms. Pellegrino.
Hi, Margot Pellegrino. Thank you so much for this presentation. I know I've mentioned at like past commission meetings that it would be so cool. I got to sit in once on the commission they had a presentation about prototype sewer systems, septic tanks. And it would be so cool. I think I had mentioned to them or suggested, but of course, it just goes in the whatever, because who am I? But that maybe the commission could use its policy, power of policy, and standards and requirements to experiment with off-grid towns. Now, of course, I did hear about a guy up in North Jersey. I haven't been able to find the case to actually look into it, but he did go off-grid and he was sued successfully by the power company. And I do, think that it would be cool if within their realm they could mandate like a little bit of like this area, like I'm totally blanking on the one name that's kind of on the Nakota Creek of that town. Anyway, and it's so small that they could almost conceivably go off the grid because they have no power. I mean, they have no pipelines, no gas. I think they have to do propane, et cetera. But the other thing that I was curious about is, because you have a legal background, of course, sir, you're a law professor. At what point do you think, I know there's been and I forget a bunch of kids brought a lawsuit against Exxon and all that, because there has been such a disinformation campaign by the fossil fuel companies to sequester any information on climate change and to deny it. They put money into denying it. So basically they're causing harm by their denial. So at what point do you think, all right, maybe it's not individuals coming together in class action suits, but what about Wall Street and the big banks? Because you've got these guys now insuring houses that are in risky areas, whether it's risky because of sea level rise or fire. I just don't understand how the insurance companies are going to be able to carry that financial load when the poo hits the fan. So I was just wondering if you saw what that tipping point might be, how far away we are. And that would mean, of course, have you been able to actually put a cost of doing nothing? Have you been able to get those numbers of, versus, I know it's expensive, like anything, to make needed change, but the payoff is dividends down the line. And of course, that goes against everything that Wall Street stands for, which is why you see some op-eds in the New York Times slamming Elizabeth Warren. But anyway, I'm kind of digressing. And then because, to look at an issue regarding water, like in Flint right now, the cost of going to a cheaper water source, and which cause physical harm. And of course, we all know the cost of air pollution associated with these fossil fuel industries does have a health cost to people. So that's also money. But we see with Flint, where they made this decision to stop drawing from, I forget what river, or was it Lake Michigan, and they went to a polluted river, and they are like doubling the number of kids that have serious ADHD problems and autism, and it's all related to the lead in the water. So now there has to be this I kind of only skimmed the article, so I didn't get into the real meat and bones of what the city is doing or the state is doing to remediate this and to provide some financial redress for this. But I was just wondering basically, so what's the cost of doing nothing? And do you see at some point Wall Street or especially our financial institutions saying, hey, you guys have created a problem, you are partially culpable? Because right now we're looking at coal, we're looking at guys going bankrupt. So what can we do to get ahead of that before, say, maybe 30, 40 years down the pike when Exxon's bankrupt and says, sorry, buddy, you're all out of luck.
Margot, thank you.
Thanks.
I'll just make three brief points, if I may. First, on the issue of going off the grid. There is a lot of attention being devoted now to microgrids, where a community generates its own electricity. That doesn't mean that they're completely disconnected, but it means they have more resilience in case there are blackouts and so forth. With respect to the Exxon and Wall Street issue, a trial just concluded yesterday in New York State Supreme Court in New York State Attorney General's lawsuit against Exxon, and the decision from that is likely within about a month, so we'll know a lot more how that is. The kids case, the Juliana case, is a suit against the federal government seeking a court order that the federal government come up with a much more aggressive plan to fight climate change. That case was argued before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, and we're waiting for a decision on that. We don't know when that'll happen. We do have the recent phenomenon that an increasing number of insurance companies are refusing to insure coal companies because they think the economics of that are so bad, and they're also refusing to insure some areas that are highly vulnerable to sea level rise and other climatic events. On the cost of doing nothing, first, the Deep Decarbonization Technical Report found that the cost of implementing its recommendations would be about 1% of the gross domestic product. So it is entirely a manageable expense, whereas the cost of doing nothing, there have been other studies of that, it's many times that. That the economics of doing nothing and allowing the emission trends to continue upward with all of the wildfires and sea level rise and precipitation are many percentage points of the gross domestic product. So the cost of doing nothing are profound.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Tittle, come on up.
Sorry, I was on a conference call, so I missed a lot of it. One of the issues that we have a lot when we're dealing with the Board of Public Utilities and other state agencies is that they don't really look at the overall value of cleaner energy sources from it's not only the societal cost of carbon, but the economic benefits of not having all that damage or not having as many asthma attacks or the health implications. And I was wondering if are you going to be able to quantify some of that to help, make that argument a little clearer to some of our regulatory agencies?
Yeah, the issue of how you value particularly solar energy is actually an issue that is being disputed right now before the Public Utility Commissions in several states. And there are a number of expert reports, although they're dueling expert reports that come out with much different sets of numbers.
I was wondering where you side on that. That's why I was interested.
I have on personal views, but that's not my expertise.
Okay, any other, please come up.
Thank you for a wonderful report.
We have
Denise
your
Garner.
Name?
Denise Garner.
Thank you.
As for, I guess, what you were saying about the bonding would be one way. The municipalities can also, do that. Invest in your communities by doing that. Okay, that's usually they're 20 to 30 years out, but that is something that we as a community can foster to move ahead and make that change. I have questions about, I looked at the MUA water and I also looked at the fact that these, the stormwater management and the fact that the MUA water, when you flush your water, it goes right out to a wastewater management system. And where does that go? Right out to our tributaries and right out to the ocean. So that, yes, people I talked to, about environmental impacts and talked to about our water usage and our freshwater usage. Yes, our ocean is rising by billions of gallons of water each and every day. The hydrologies from, when they take that water from when you flush it, it goes right out to the ocean. So it's like a faucet running all day long, forever. The MUAs right now, I know Lyndon and Rochelle are redoing some of their infrastructure for that. Some of them are old and antiquated, so they finally got the bonding to redo some of that. The hydrologies of protecting our deeper aquifers, as you mentioned, yes, they are getting lower. We are losing that water, and the water that goes out to the ocean is chemicals. Okay, they clean it to 80 to 90%. And then it goes right out to the ocean. So we're losing an ecosystem there. Our oceans are rising from that. Our deeper aquifers are being impacted, okay? And then what else are we having? Fracking. They're taking and extracting that water from the clean aquifers, okay? Because of our use, we need to use that to live. Here in America, we are very, how can I say, comfortable. There's a book I read, Factfulness, and we are number 4. We are at level 4, meaning we are very comfortable. We have everything you want. And there are places around the world that are still at level 1. And those places are also being impacted by what we do. So essentially, when I looked at what you had brought up and talked about that, my main concern is the water, the MUA water. And that is a factor in the global warming, climate change, and we're going to be drowning because of that. So what can we do? I looked at it from a geographical point of view. I do GIS. And areas, when they map the wetlands, outside of the wetlands is a recharge area that has not been really basically considered. They are just as important as the wetlands. So by working and redoing those wastewater management systems and bringing it back in to where the areas need it, and as we can keep our aquifers, replenished, that would be a way of, combating this ocean rising. Okay. Also, my brother-in-law's a geologist, and he says, well, we went from a very cold sense to a very warmer sense. He says, but we need to also look to, how can we improve that? How can we, as being, scientists, to make those changes?
Is that your question?
So what can we do to, make the MUAs and, to protect our deeper aquifers? Those are key to our survival. And with the extraction of all that water, the earth plates are starting to push together, so the earth is getting smaller geographically. Earthquakes are happening. So we need to recharge that water in order to make our earth keep its plates as buoyant as possible. Population is increasing, so you've got a lot of factors working here, and nobody's ever talked about the water.
Denise, that's good thing to think about. I mean, how
I've
to deal
thought
with the
about it for
rising
years, and I've got questions for you afterwards about development in my township and the effects of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So there's no question that some of the most profound impacts of climate change will be on water. And as an overall matter, climate change tends to make the wet places wetter, the dry places drier. It's my understanding sea level rise is not caused by water flowing out from rivers or aquifers. It's caused by thermal expansion, that the warmer water is, the bigger it gets, and also the melting of glaciers and so forth. The water that is flowing into rivers goes into the hydrologic cycle and goes into clouds and rains back. But there's no question that there are profound impacts that need to be addressed.
Perhaps if we did recharge the aquifers more, in a case like with the Delaware River, with saltwater intrusion, that might help keep saltwater intrusion from getting into the
That's
aquifers.
right.
So, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Mariana Samara from Shimon.
Mary Ann, welcome.
In your adaptations, you're talking about getting rid of the natural gas. Is that correct?
Cutting back on the use of natural gas, that's right.
Right. So you don't want more pipelines.
I'm not here to address the pipeline issue, but I will say that one of the conclusions of the technical report on which we relied is that we must have much less use of natural gas unless we have carbon capture and sequestration for it, which we don't.
And what's going to happen, you're mentioning the excess gas when they're not using it anymore. What's going to happen to all this flowing through all these pipelines all over the country? Where is it going to go?
Well, it stops. If you're no longer putting natural gas into the pipelines will no longer have natural gas. And if you're not extracting it, it doesn't hang around. I mean,
and what
are
these
the
leaks
pipelines.
doing to us? Like, what is it, North Dakota? After all that fighting, they get their pipeline and it's leaking already. What's that gonna do around here? I mean, the Kirkwood-Cohansey aquifer is not deep. It is very shallow. It is surface in some places, and that's the water I drink. And I spoke with my well guy, and the deeper well, which is like 400 feet, I'm like, I got to get a deeper well. He said, that water is terrible. He said, you do not want that deeper water. So what am I going to do? What's the answer?
Miriam, we're really here to address climate, the carbon dioxide in the air and the change in weather patterns. So I'm not sure how we can, I think the other things that the commission does really addresses the concerns that you have. So that's kind of another topic, and you're welcome to ask that question and certainly come back and ask more questions like that.
But your goal is to stop or severely cut back on pipelines.
That's not exactly how I put it.
I would call a question to that. Let's not embarrass our presenter and ask appropriate questions. Not a question that he's not able.
He's got a better
to
answer than any of us here do.
Marion, it's a complex issue. There's no simple solutions. You've got to look at everything. And I think that's what our speaker has been talking about, looking at it all, not getting rid of all pipelines, not getting rid of all gas, just taking a look at the whole picture.
Well, we had an excellent area here because the commission kept an eye on it for so many years. And now all of a sudden, you want to destroy it. And I don't understand it.
We look forward to hearing you in the future. Please come back. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any other comments?
Second the motion.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Aye, okay. Commissioners, comments? Bill, you look like maybe you have a question.
Thank you.
Jerry?
I'd just like to thank the presenter for persevering. Now, the other item that I would like to bring up, I share the executive director's frustration with our communication system, and I'm not sure that I'm an expert in communication, but I've seen better systems working, and I would urge that we commit funds for other items that we could do to next month have a better ability to communicate.
I can assure you we will not have a better system next month.
Yeah.
We've had people in here, we've had computer people in here, we have all kinds of people come through here, and we haven't come up with anything yet. So we're working on it, but I can assure you the way we're going to get around this next month is we're going to get commissioners in the room. I'm going to send an email out today, commissioners in the room.
Well, certainly using the cell phone was better than what we have.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Darcy
Ira.
had the live stream growing, and that presented problems.
Okay, I really wanted comments on the presentation today, and we can come back and add other comments if you'd like. Ed, would you like to comment now, or do you want to wait till the end?
Professor Gerard, thank you for coming. I really appreciate your time and your effort. And I want the public to know that Nancy is responsible for getting Professor Gerard here. She reached out to me and asked me if I knew Professor. We've worked together for a long time, but I want the public to know I appreciate Nancy here inviting me down. Thank you.
Jerry. Oh, Jerry. Looking right at you. Mark. Commissioner Lobel.
Professor Gerard, I'd like to add my thanks. And I think your presentation was very inspiring to me, obviously uplifting to this audience who cares very passionately about that issue too. In fact, to the people who were asking, what will this mean in terms of, now you've brought this message to us, is this going to lead to a change in our comprehensive management plan? I for one, hope so. Like I said, I intend to take many of your recommendations to heart, the ones that appear to me to be pertinent to the work of this body, and I'm going to forward that in a memo, and it will include some recommendations for specific CMP change. Beyond that, I would like to comment about the communications issue. Sure, Jerry, you're right. We need a better system, and we're working on it. The executive director has been working on this, and it's very hard to come to a solution there. So I would instead like to direct a comment to the Senate President, if he's paying attention. Senator Sweeney, we need your help. We need to put people in these seats. We need for the Senate to act either this month or next month on the governor's nominees to the Pinelands Commission so that we can have a quorum regularly. I ask you earnestly. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to thank our speaker for coming down and getting a taste of what we deal with on a monthly basis here, whether it's getting people in a room or dealing with some pretty complicated issues in terms of climate change and development and land use rights and so forth. And I appreciate your thoughts. I hope that as we move forward on potential changes to the plan, that we could call upon you and your expertise if required. And I appreciate again your presentation. I thought it was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gerard, I appreciate you being here today. I think the problem is so complex that I just hope we can address it and slow it down somehow and stop it sometime beyond our lifetime. I think it's not going to be fixed for us, maybe not even for our children or our grandchildren, but we need to address it. There are other species out there that can take our place if we don't. But it is a terribly complex problem, and there are no simple solutions to any of it. And I think what we want to try to do is find out what the commission can do specifically within our jurisdiction to address, what is our fair share of the problem. How can we abate the consequences of the weather, consequences of the sea rise? What can we do to address that? And I think the book that you brought to our attention helps in that manner. And certainly you being here tonight, and as Commissioner Avey asked you whether you would give us some more advice in the future, that would be appreciated as well. So I would just like to thank you for devoting so much of your life to addressing this situation, and look forward to hearing from you in the future. And thanks so much.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome. Okay, is there, please, yes. No.
I'll move we adjourn.
Wait a minute. It's on the agenda. Do commissioners want to stick with the agenda?
Anybody else want to say anything?
I'm sorry I put you in the spot like that.
Can we just ask the public if they want to
Yes,
further comment?
yeah. Thank you. All right, well, so I'm going to open it up to public comment. Come on up. 3 minutes. I'm being told I got it. I have to be a stickler
Oh, I think
here.
I got it down.
1 minute,
Okay.
2 minutes. Come on, that's such a rhyme. It's such a-
Denise Garner, Jackson Township. I listened to the entire meeting, and thank you for all of your, hard work and due diligence in protecting the Pine Barrens. But I live in Jackson Township, and Jackson Township is one of the most key components to the Pine Barrens. It houses 3 watersheds, the birthplace of the Matiticon, the Toms River, and Kirkwood Cohansey, all come and start in Jackson Township. I call it a trifecta of life, all right? Right now, our township is looking at massive development, and this was from also the impacts from the Southern Reliable line. As I talked to Agnes a few years ago, about the impact of that line coming through and the fact that it would cause massive development, and it has. The door has opened. Right now, we are looking at 2 massive developments on the Jackson Planning Board agenda, and that will chart the course for the future of our township and the Pine Barrens. The first development is known as the Jackson Trails. Okay, this one is a half a mile from the military base, and it also sits on 547 and the border of Manchester Township. There's 367 single homes and 92 affordable housing with a house of worship. I'm reading from something that I wrote and published. The second mass development, which was denied, was the first, which was called Jackson Park North, which was denied on Monday at that planning board. We had a massive amount of people that came out. We campaigned to stop it because of the amount of soils that they would be bringing in. We don't know the contamination, and that's another thing too. Where's the soil coming from? It also sits on.
Please, kind of wrap up here.
Okay, so what I'm looking at is, all of this is impacting, the Pine Barrens. We're the headwaters. Everything rolls downhill, okay? So the Jackson Trails is coming and looking, you guys will be reviewing that application, okay? And because it does sit within a half a mile of the military base, I looked at the maps on that. It's in a high concern area, which means the flights that go out, the ACUs that they reestablished on that. It's in a high crash zone, but you guys have the ability to deny that application.
I make a comment, and that is, if this application is called up for us to hear public comment, that would be the best time for you to comment about this.
Well, I'm just bringing that forward to you now because we're
Appreciate
looking.
it.
There's a lot going on right now in my township. And
Gotcha, and your.
Jackson is the gateway
Your time is
to
up.
the Pinelands.
Finish, please.
It's the first initial bookend to the Barnegat Bay too. If that township gets overdeveloped, this could be the beginning of the end of the Pine Barrens. I used to live down here, and I know.
Thank you.
So please help.
Thank you for coming out and presenting that to us. Yes. Good morning, Fred.
Good morning. My name is Fred Akers from the Great Egg Harbor Watershed Association, and I just want to mention a quick word about dredge spoils and the other part of the Pinelands National Reserve that you guys don't have jurisdiction over. But before I do that, I want to just, so I don't forget, that Chuck Horner mentioned about his 30 years. He was trying to think back. And I think that his 30 years is one of the invaluable resources of the Pinelands. And what happened is I review Army Corps permits on an ongoing basis. And I saw one that was proposing to dump dredge spoils in Corpus City. And so I looked at the mapping on that and I said, well, gee, this is in the Pinelands National Reserve, but it's in the CAFR Pinelands. not in what I'll call your Pinelands. And I brought that to the attention of the executive director, and she took action on that. And I wanted to thank her for that. And Chuck looked at it, and they presented a letter back to the Army Corps that basically the situation wasn't looked at in terms of the Pinelands. And in my research, I discovered a sad metric, and that is that in the past, in particular, Jack Gibson and Nick Aselta passed legislation that disconnected the Pinelands National Reserve CAFRA Pinelands from the Comprehensive Management Plan. And so the only real thread that's left is that the commission has a memorandum with DEP to provide advice, I would say, an advisory interpretation of things, which they did in this case, but I'm not happy that the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection didn't even seem to know that there's dredge spoils were going into Pinelands. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that, but I do want to thank the Pinelands for acting on that. Thank you.
Good to see you, Fred. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Patricia Hanson. I'm the councilwoman in Evesham Township. And I just wanted to convey Mayor Veazey's appreciation on everything that the Pinelands has helped us with. And I hope we can continue to work with the Pinelands in the future. I just wanted to thank everyone, and we're very pleased and very happy with everything that we've done.
Thank
So
you so much. Occasionally. It's okay. Come on up, Agnes.
Agnes Marcel, Chesterfield. I know you have the communication problems, but no amount of technology is going to help. I think with the phones, what you have to do maybe is get a volunteer, an intern, someone to go to the houses of the other people to help them out. I think that's the only real reason. They just the confusion is just too much. So that might be.
Thanks for the suggestion, Agnes. Okay, is there anyone else? Okay, so I'm going to close the meeting. Did you want to?
Motion, we adjourn.
No.
On the belief that the third time is the charm, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we adjourn.
So you would be second the adjourn motion made by.
Yes, I'll second it.
Can I just ask before we take a vote on that, how World Water Day went?
Yes. That was a pun. So people go in waders, as you know, at World Water Monitoring Day, we had.
Did the executive director, Don Weeders?
What's that? No, she was not there. No.
I was just imagining.
But we had approximately 200 students there. And members of your staff from every office were participating, along with DEP and Jacques Cousteau National Estuarine Marine Reserve. That's always hard to say. And it was an excellent day. I think the students got a lot out of it. We talk about water quality and test the water, catch various aquatic critters, and talk about water changes and what that leads to. We incorporated this year a new station where we talked about responsible use of resources in our public forests and parks, and we hope to expand on that. That includes a message of stay on the road, if you know what I mean. So we're really looking forward to next year's event as well. And just one other thing while I have the mic. I know we're talking about climate change. Next Thursday, we'll have our second presentation in the Pinelands Speaker Series, and that's about combating climate change in the residential landscape. So we're going to have two speakers, one from Barnegat Bay Partnership, one from Ocean County Soil Conservation District, talk about the challenges faced by homeowners as a result of the various issues from climate change, such as flooding, and how to mitigate those issues. So that's at 10 a.m. next Thursday in this room. So I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, so that,
Yes, it's free and open to the public. Everybody encouraged to come. We could stream it if you would like.
I would like to do it.
We could, yeah.
I think that'd be great too.
Yeah.
All right, unless there's any other suggestions,
It's good. Oh, yeah.
I would agree with the mayor that why can't we stream all of our committee meetings? We do our commission meetings now. Let's screen our committee meetings as well as special events like this, which I think are, give the public the opportunity and us the opportunity, other than on the phone, to be involved in what's going on.
Yeah.
Could be.
we have a motion on the floor to adjourn.
No, you won't.
We can't take it. We can only do adjourn because we don't have the quorum, so.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
So all in favor to adjourn?
Aye.